Big story on global markets, and I shouldn't say this, but this is the kind of stuff that excites us because people think that market news is rather boring. But it's been a real bloodbath on the JSE today, and investors have decided to give up trying to recapture lost gains as a result of falling stock prices. A sharp rise in the coronavirus cases in South Korea, Italy and Iran also reportedly has sent the world markets into a tailspin. So the JSE has been hammered 2,500 points at the end of the markets day. And joining me now to speak about what has been deemed a bloodbath by many market participants is Nesson Nair, who is a senior portfolio manager at Sasfin. Nesson, many thanks for your time this evening. I don't know if you were excited, as I was, to see this kind of movement and this volatility on the back of the coronavirus so early in the week.
Yes, there's a lot of adjectives I'll use to describe today's market action. Excited is one of them. It certainly took us by surprise, and it shouldn't have, because, the story's been in the news now for quite some time, and we saw how complacently, markets reacted to it. Particularly in the US, the market continued to go higher and higher and higher. And I suppose, eventually the chickens do come home to roost, and we saw that today with the understanding that this is not just a problem limited to China. This is actually a global pandemic now, with Italy on lockdown. So I think a lot of people taking risk off the table today as a result.
Yeah, and where are we seeing that global sell-off? And let's perhaps focus on the local market. Is it the carry cash sell-off that we're seeing? Are we seeing funds, unit trusts, the likes being sold off? And is it foreign or local investors that are dropping their funds here for better opportunities elsewhere?
So I think it's a sell-off that's taking place largely in emerging markets, which are really the risk category for global growth. Within the subsectors, resources were heavily sold off. Notwithstanding the fact that the gold price was slightly up, palladium slightly down, but resources were down about 5.5%. The overall market 4.5%. Industrials and financials about 3.5%. But what's interesting was that this was a broad-based, indiscriminate selling of risk assets. So, many companies that had very little to do with the coronavirus were being sold off 6%, 7%, 8%, and without any new news coming in, which tells me that it's a combination of local and international sellers. The rand was relatively stable throughout this, not stable, but relatively stable. Not much movement on the rand that we saw in stocks, which tells me it's probably a combination of local and foreign investors that are looking to take risk off the table.
Right, and of course this is a trend that we'll continue to see after the minister delivers his budget speech tomorrow here in South Africa. That sell-off just drawing on the dim outlook for our fiscus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, he's probably this is probably the hardest budget speech ever, certainly in the time I can remember, because, there's a mounting state debt, there's an impending credit downgrade, which is going to exacerbate the ability to raise new debt. The problems at the SOE are not really understood, let alone, easy to resolve. The consumer confidence is at all-time lows. Many of the high-frequency data is pointing to a prolonged recession. And, of course, we all look to the government to see, how policy is going to address these serious headwinds the economy has. So it'll be an interesting one, but, the finance minister has his way, and he's got a good sense of humor about these. Let's just hope that the policy changes that are made, are pragmatic and that the investors receive them well.
He's definitely got his work cut out for him. Nesson, many thanks for your time this afternoon. That is Nesson Nair, who's a senior portfolio manager at Sasfin.